The darling of the 30-something foot sailboat world used to be the Catalina 380. It's family friendly, it's fast enough, super comfortable, pretty well made, and a great deal for about 75 grand. But that was a year ago, and today it's getting very hard to find one. And when you do, the price is kind of ridiculous. So, what's a sailor to do? I got an email from friends John and Charla, who I did a consult with about a year ago, and they were shopping for a 380 at the time for all the right reasons, but they just couldn't find one for what they were supposed to be selling for. And I looked too, the prices are way up on the 380, but John and Charla found something else, another hidden gem that the price hasn't gone crazy on yet. John says, for the past 6 months, I was watching the market and casually emailing some brokers here and there. We were set on the Catalina 380 as per the discussion they had with me, and due to the overall build quality, the comfort, and all the features that boat has. Beautiful boats, and we did see a couple close to our price range, but they were in Grenada or other faraway places, far from perfect condition, which was reflected in the price. Every time John mentioned that he was looking for a boat to his fellow club members, two or three of them kept talking about the 380 and her lack of storage out back. I guess the rear berth is so big it leaves little to no cockpit storage for fenders and whatever else. It wasn't a deal killer for John and Charla, but they soon realized that if they wanted one of those boats, they were going to need to pay between 130 and 140,000 Canadian, and it was hard to find within some sort of reasonable distance they could get it home. The US to Canadian exchange rate also made things worse for them because they're in Canada. A few months ago, a fellow club member turned them on to the Jeanneau Sun Odyssey 37. That guy used to own one. He loved it so much that they expanded their search to include that boat too. John says he did some research, and unlike the Beneteaus from that era, the grid isn't glued down to the hull in the Beneteaus, but it's glassed and bonded the way it should be in the Jeanneau. After months of searching and weeks of negotiating, they purchased a 2006 Sun Odyssey 37 shoal draft in a little bit less than perfect condition, but they got it for 85,000 Canadian with $5,700 in winter storage already paid. So what's he talking about here with that grid being glued down? Well, in a lot of production boats, especially of that era, with bolt-on keels, the hull to keel joint alone is not enough to support the stress of the keel. So they put a grid system of stringers in the bottom of the hull. This is a very cost-effective way to make boats, and basically what makes a production boat a production boat. Two schools of thought on this building process though. Sometimes they build the keel matrix and put glue all over the bottom and then squish it down into the hull. This has been known to fail after a hard grounding. So the second school of thought is to glue it down and use fiberglass tabbing to bond it directly to the hull. Significantly stronger in a grounding, and as John points out, unlike the Beneteau of the era, the Sun Odyssey has the glue and tabbing method, so the Jeanneau Sun Odysseys is much stronger. John also talks about the Catalina 380 lacking cockpit storage lockers, and this is true. You trade the storage for the big back bedroom. On the Sun Odyssey, you don't get the same back bedroom, so you do get the storage in the cockpit. So let's talk about this Sun Odyssey that John's on about. These were first built in 1998 on into the early 2000s, and the going price on them is currently what the Catalina 380 used to be about a year ago, around 75 grand. They're 37.44 feet long and 12.08 feet wide, with two keel options, a 6.33 or the more desirable for most people, shoal draft at 5 feet. And while most 37 footers weigh 10 or 12,000 pounds, this girl comes in at 14,175. That's pretty beefy for what she is, and that's a good thing most of the time. And I say most of the time because heavy makes for a more comfortable ride, but in a lot of cases, and including this boat, they haven't met that weight with extra sail area. You can look at the sail area to displacement on sailboat data for any boat and get an idea of a boat's ability to perform when being powered by the wind. A sail area to displacement above 20 is super high performance, things like the Olsen 30. Anything between 16 and 20 is reasonably good, and below 16 is kinda silly because it's slow. And this boat scores a whopping 15.13. So for the size, she's a bit underpowered on the canvas side. And reading the owners' forums, people admit that they aren't winning very many races. But that's not really what this boat's for. While I have you, can you click subscribe? And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like this video, leave a comment and tell me why. And if you don't want to do anything, that's okay, because it's the week between Christmas and New Year's right now where everyone's just full of cheese and has no idea what day it is anyway. Under power, she's got a 3-cylinder Volvo or a Yanmar as standard with bigger options for bigger power plants, and a sail drive with a seal that needs to be changed every 10 or so years. As a sail drive owner myself, I can say that I don't mind having one. There's no stuffing box to drip, drip, drip into my bilge all day. There's no maintenance that a stuffing box boat has. But the trade-off is every 10 to 20 years, you have to replace that big expensive sail drive seal. Mine was about $700 and it took me a whole day. And while that will eat up a day of your time and almost $1,000, once you're done, you don't have to think about it again for at least a decade. Kind of nice. Volvo says do it every 10 years, but in practice, people seem to do it every 15 to 20. When you see a sail drive seal, take it out of the box, you'll understand why they last so long. They're almost like a car tire. They're so thick and durable. Fuel and water on this boat are small, 30 and 70 gallons, which you'll get by just fine as a weekender, but if you want to go travel, you'll need to be one of those boats with all the jerry cans on the deck. And speaking of travel, the capsize screening formula on this boat is 2.00, which is a metric that puts this boat right on the line between ocean going and not so ocean going. So I'd take her to the Caribbean, but probably no further. They've also made this boat for the moorings charter fleet, and she came with all sorts of different interiors. In that setting, she was called the Moorings 37, and they used this hull to make a very racy version, the Sunfast 37, so she does have some potential to go fast. In checking in with the owners, I did find some issues, as you would with really any boat. As a high production run boat, they do have some issues, but none specifically with structural build quality. Here are the foibles. First, the genoa tracks tend to leak. This is about normal on any production boat, so rebedding is necessary at solid intervals every 2 to 5 years probably. If you buy one of these, rebed the tracks right away, because if they do leak, owners point out the side decks are wood cored and super thin wood. So the owners say if you let water in for even a minute, it wicks so fast into the core, and it's a horrible job to try and fix. Just don't let water in is the advice they give. And if you're looking at one of these boats, check for moisture and soft spots around the tracks. The windows leak too and need to be resealed. Owners say the standard 2-blade prop vibrates a bit and isn't very efficient. Upgrading to a 3-blade folding or feathering deal will change your life enough that it's worth the money for this boat. Some found the forward bulkhead tabbing to be delaminating a little bit. The forward bulkhead is the smaller one anyway. This is good and bad. It's good because it's not a plastic liner boat, so you can actually get to the bulkhead tabbing. The bad is that being a high volume production boat, mistakes happen, and the forward bulkhead has been known to start delaminating from the hull. It's not hard to fix if you have a good fiberglass kit like the one I talked about on Practical Sailor. The through hulls were sort of cheap and poorly bedded in the factory, so like anything, replace as needed. Maybe the biggest problem with this boat though is why you might not buy one. These, in my humble opinion, and never having owned one but sailed on a few, they have interiors that feel a bit cheaper than the Catalina 380. This was the early 2000s, and if you were in the yachting world back then, you know this was the time where it was hard or near impossible to find sustainable teak. I talked about this in a Practical Sailor video too. If you guys aren't watching Practical Sailor, you really are missing out on a lot. We talk about that nitty-gritty kind of stuff like sustainable teak over there a lot. Anyway, big volume boat manufacturers had a hard time with interiors back then because of the teak. That's why things got all pressboard IKEA, and this boat is from that time. They do use real wood here and there, but it's thinly varnished, and at this age of these boats today, things are starting to show their age. Buying a Sun Odyssey 37 today, I would look extra hard for one that hasn't been abused and doesn't have a million miles under the keel. For example, there's one in the Bahamas right now, and while it looks like a good deal, it's already been sailed south and modestly outfitted and well lived in. I would want to find one of these that's been Grandpa's lake sailor weekender for a few decades with very little engine hours and wear and tear. An example of this boat that's been well kept and cared for, and all of these are 20 plus years old now, so they're all due for standing rigging and probably sails, and possibly their second or even third sail drive seal. All things to consider if you want one of these boats. But would I buy one? Absolutely yes, if the goal is a cheap, reliable way to get to the Bahamas or some normal cruising or weekending. Reasons not to? It won't be as fast as the Catalina. The 380 PHRF is about 111. This Sun Odyssey 37 is more toward 140. So in go fast conditions, the Catalina is going to pull away from you. And while that doesn't matter to most people, it does to me, because anytime two sailboats are going the same direction on the same body of water, it is a race. The mission here at Lady K Sailing has always been to get more people sailing more easily, and I certainly wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. A big shout out to the people on Patreon who give as little as a couple of bucks an episode to make this all possible. If you'd like to help support that mission of getting more people sailing, please consider becoming a patron. Until next time, friends, keep the heavy side down, but not too far down. We'll see you in 2025. Happy New Year.